Welcome to ITProTV, your source for online IT training. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned IT pro, we've got courses to meet your needs. CompTIA, Cisco, Linux, Apple, Microsoft, security, cloud, and more. All online, all on demand. Check out our binge-worthy IT training at ITPro.tv.
Hello, and thanks for joining us today for this ITProTV webinar. Have a question? Use the GoToWebinar question box throughout the webinar, and we will answer as many as we can at the end. You will receive a link to the recording of the webinar delivered to your inbox. Now let's get started.
Welcome into the ITProTV webinar series. I'm your host, Lauren Deal, and I am joined with an edutainer, the one and only Wes Bryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Excited to dive into this webinar. We got a lot of great topics today.
Well, I am so excited, but what are we going to be talking about today?
All right, so this one's going to be all about small business security, and we're going to be looking at a variety of topics that surrounding best practices to protect organizations. We'll be talking about things like security solutions for small businesses, implementing security policies, protecting information and, well, the devices and networks that touch that information, and then finally a very, very important thing, and that is training your employees, leveling them up so that they have the skills to give you what you need for your business.
Oh my word, this is a jam-packed webinar. I'm so excited to jump in, and you, I'm sure, are just as excited, and we're going to be engaging with you all show long or all webinar long, so make sure you're putting your questions in the chat. I have it right here and ready, and I can actually just, hey, Wes, we've got a question. So this is so perfect. Wes, do we have a guest today?
We absolutely do. I'm very excited. We have Mr. Erik Semmel, VP of Tab Computer Systems, that's going to be joining us today. How are you doing, Erik?
Hey, good guys. Great to be here.
All right, very good. So what do you say we go ahead and we kick it off? You know, we've got a lot of great topics that we're going to be talking about today, and one of the topics that we got to start with is, you know, security solutions for small businesses. This has got to be on everybody's mind today. I know cybersecurity is a big buzzword, and Erik, I know you know a thing or two about helping organizations and businesses out with this.
We do. Believe it or not, the easiest way to start when you're looking at security solutions for small business is to help them understand what they actually have for hardware, software, and the network infrastructure itself. So many small businesses don't even know what a server is, what a switch is, what a router is. You know, they're accountants, they're financial planners, they're manufacturers, they're not paying attention to cyber or their devices. So you need to assess what they have and then show that to them and work to explain what each device does and how they have to pay attention to it.
Most definitely, and I can see that, you know, when it comes to asset discovery, it's important, right? We have to know what it is that we have to secure. We can't secure our organizations, first of all, if we really don't know what we have, and then if we don't, we lack the knowledge of how we actually can go about securing that infrastructure. I'm sure that a couple of things probably come to mind, especially with small businesses, like for instance, cost, right? You know, cost has got to be something that's got to be on everybody's mind. If you're a large organization, you might have capital, you might have the resources to throw at you know, these solutions, but that has to be one thing that has to be on the minds of smaller organizations. Is that the case?
It really is, and one of our approaches is to make what we do affordable. So we approach this for all of our solutions the most affordable way we can find for a small to mid-sized business, so that they actually do take action and implement some of these solutions. Simple solutions like 2FA, two-factor authentication configurations, web defense configurations, mail filtering, and antivirus and link filtering are all part of the more basic approaches, a basic EDR technology to kind of keep an eye on what the bad guys are doing with lateral movement across your network that an antivirus really doesn't detect or do anything about. And these technologies do not have to be expensive. We pick up many clients because their current quote-unquote managed service providers are charging them so much for their security tools they can't even afford to buy new servers or workstations.
Sure.
So affordability is key.
Definitely, and you know, maintenance. How about low maintenance, right? Because you know, small businesses, they might have a limited skill set, and we're going to talk about the benefits of training employees, but you know, that has to present a challenge. Do you see in today's day and age where we have small business, even medium businesses, where you have administrators, you know, wearing multiple hats?
They constantly are wearing multiple hats. Most of the main contacts that are in cyber that are responsible for their company's IT, or at least to interface with companies like us, might be the controller, might be the owner of the company. And their expertise is in something else generally, like designing buildings or financial planning. So they don't even understand the maintenance. And then so when getting companies like us involved to help with that understanding and making sure they understand they should do it, and understand that you got to reboot a server to apply the updates, which that means you're going to be impacted if we have to do it during working hours, which we try to avoid, obviously. But just getting those types of policies across or points across to these clients or these companies it can be difficult, and they'd rather just not worry about it.
Yeah, sure. And one thing that seems kind of challenging too, we know that the IT landscape, it changes so rapidly. You know, look just 5-10 years ago where we were with BYOD, bringing your own devices. People want to bring devices in. They want to be able to use them. It, you know, could enhance productivity because it brings a familiarity. But the problem with that is it also brings a challenge to administrators to secure those devices. Work from home is a big thing today. And one of the things that's kind of challenging, I can only imagine, for your administrators is to reach out through the tunnel, if you will, and to have any kind of visibility into what is the security stance from a remote worker's point. So let's talk a little bit about endpoint security. That's got to be on everybody's mind. It's got to be something that's challenging.
It is, right. So your point about endpoint security and BYOD is an issue, especially during COVID. People were working from home, and of course they were doing their work for their insurance company or for your doctor's office or what have you, and then their high school kid or their middle school kid was using it for their homework. There was no security put on these systems. There's no monitoring. There's no web defense, and so they're connecting to their businesses without any kind of protections whatsoever. So basic endpoint protection, we recommend Microsoft Defender as a basic, good, quote unquote, free antivirus as far as endpoint protection. But we also recommend an EDR that is going to protect your system as well, so that it can work with that antivirus to look at endpoint activities fairly cheaply for the malicious activity that is hard to detect by antivirus. It's going to look for any kind of movement across workstations that might happen due to an Excel spreadsheet or something like that that looks odd, but the AV would not see it. And so the EDR is a very important aspect of this, where it'll alert companies like us to take action and shut that down.
And sure, that brings visibility because you need to be alerted to these things, and these things are happening. Now, we want to remind all of our viewers out there, make sure you send in your questions. And Lauren, I believe you've got one of our first questions.
We do. Actually, this one is from Lindsay. She says, what are good protocols to have in place if our company is the target of a cyber attack? I think this is right on brand.
Well, you have to figure out what you're going to do if you get attacked. How are you going to respond, number one? So you need to put together some ideas how you're going to deal with that, understand what data the bad guys were looking for, and whether or not you're going to be on the hook for how you're going to report that information to your customers. So kind of get together with your management to decide a plan of response should you get attacked. As far as preparing for that cyber attack or preventing it, you're going to be looking for proper backup of your system. Of course, an offsite backup is going to be very helpful in dealing with a cyber attack. Obviously, you also need good cyber insurance in place, and they're also going to require all sorts of aspects of your company, as far as 2FA to be implemented, security awareness training to be implemented, EDR. So they're going to force some of these things on you, but the key is to think about today. What if you were attacked? What data would be something you'd have to deal with as far as reporting to your customers? Hey, I think the bad guys in Uzbekistan got our stuff, and we have to talk about it somehow. You need to get that put together now before it happens, and also figure out how you're going to operate. If you do have cyber insurance in place, sometimes you have to leave all that hardware aside as a cyber insurance company confirms you had all the things in place they told you to before you got attacked. And now you're going to figure out how you're going to operate on completely different platforms and how long that might take to get you up and running, depending on how bad the attack was. So there's lots to plan for.
Sure, and one of the things that I like that you said is planning ahead of time, because right in the middle of an attack is not, not a great time to figure out what you're going to do. And that planning ahead of time allows people to know what are their roles, who has the authority over whatever the response might be. And you mentioned backup. I know that your organization works heavily with people that follow regulations and follow things like NIST guidelines and stuff. And one of the things that we say here at ITProTV and we tell our students is that they should be implementing some strategic type of backups, like the 3-2-1 strategy, right? 3 different copies of your information, 2 different medias, 1 off-site. Is that something that you try to relay to your company, your customers, when it comes to building a more robust security solution?
It really is, and it's important. And folks don't. Again, they're costly, right? You have to spend the money on this technology. It's an ongoing cost for that local technology and the offsite technology. The one thing that a lot of companies skip, though, is to test it. Just because your backup is running and everything shows successful, doesn't mean when something happens, the restoration is going to go smoothly. Why is that? Well, Microsoft updates the software, and now it doesn't work so well with the antivirus product that was on there. And when you go to restore, it may not work. It might work today, may not work when the problem happens. So you need to occasionally, on a scheduled basis, test that restoration. And that's one of the things too many companies and even personal users never test. How would I restore my data if I had a problem? It should be part of your disaster recovery policies.
One of the things that can help reduce costs, potentially, if it's implemented right, is to adopt things like cloud-based solutions. Do you have a lot of customers in small businesses that say, hey, we can offload some of that capital expenditure, if you will, and we can pay on a subscription base, but with that also comes new challenges as well?
So yes and no. There's actually kind of a formula where, depending on the number of seats you have, you can either benefit from that or not. But the most common cloud-based solution would be Microsoft 365. Offloading that onto the cloud is fine, but you still, guess what, need to back it up. You could still have people who will delete email out of spite or by accident, delete company data out of spite or by accident. Microsoft themselves, they can lose accounts. I won't even say out of spite or by accident, but who knows how they'll lose it. You need to back up that data, right? You have to be prepared for that failure. So now you're paying for additional services to back up the services you thought were going to save you money to protect yourself. Of course, you need 2FA implemented in those things, and you still need email protection running on the Microsoft 365 solution. So I haven't really seen necessarily where it's a savings per se. It depends. It really depends on how many users you have. You have a couple hundred seats running Microsoft 365. That's a pretty big expense, and a local server could be cheaper.
Sure, and security is always that one size fits your company, not one size fits all type of solution. One of the questions that we had come in is about preparing. And that's one of the things that is on our list. Talking about implementing security policies, because it is important to protect those digital assets, and it's important to have a plan and in place and the guidelines to follow that plan. So can we move into talking about implementing security policies?
Well, the key really is to figure out who needs access to what and give those people least access, right? The principle of least access. Do not give a brand new college student who's entering your company to be the IT guy admin rights to the entire castle, right? Although he may have to be given that, but you have to work on those types of security policies, whether it be deprecating those types of users to really focus on what they have to do, areas of the company as far as the data folders that they should or should not have access to. All that should be decided by user so that you can then control that. Also, if you're dealing with NIST or aerospace requirements, there's certain types of data that you're working with called CUI data that has to be segmented. So again, you need to focus on who needs access to these areas of the system and come up with those policies as far as how they will work on that data. And those policies can actually be more work than the actual cyber technologies that go in to protect them. Individual policies as far as deciding who gets what takes a lot of time to figure out, and making sure you keep track of that. Of course, there's going to be policies too to remove users from your system as they leave your company. So many times you find people with users that have been gone for years that are on your system still, and they could have had a password of ice cream, let's say. And the bad guys are trying to get in, and they see Bob Smith out there, and he used his password of ice cream on the old LinkedIn, and they figured that information out, and now they're going to try it on your system. So you got to get rid of these users that are no longer in your company to try to keep that understanding again back to that assessment. What do I have? Who do I have? what do I have to watch, is really something that's constantly going to be going on.
Sure. So a structured account management policy that dictates how we onboard, how we offboard, service accounts, how we, if we offboard somebody, we typically disable their accounts and don't leave them orphaned. And it definitely seems like it's something that's very, very important. Now, we got another question, do we not, Lauren?
We do. I'm like, hey, Wes, there's another question. All right, this one's from Brian. Brian says, what are the top few recommended EDR solutions for small businesses?
One of the most popular ones that we find is Huntress. It's a very good EDR technology, very inexpensive depending on your scope and size, I guess. And it does a very good job of paying attention to what can be going on your systems that AV is not paying attention to. That is one of the ones that we focus here on at TAB. I haven't looked at others lately because once you find your stack, we do look quarterly at other potential if we need to, but right now we're looking at the Huntress EDR as being a good solution.
Very good. I have a question too myself. Do you see that in today's day and age that or is it too challenging? And what I mean is, should we be implementing that zero trust mindset, right? Always assume breach, verify, because the days of Reagan are long gone. Trust but verify. We never trust, we always verify, and always assume breach. Now, I know that sounds like the tinfoil hat here. I've got it in the closet over there. We'll pull it out. But it seems like, we used to protect that north to south traffic. If it's beyond our perimeter, we don't really worry about it. Once it's in our networks, we authenticate, and then we have this transitive trust. Do you warn your customers about implementing those old mindsets?
Well, it's really not an old mindset. You're right. Zero trust is something that basically we all should be focused on going forward. The problem with zero trust is it can produce a lot of trouble for your users. There are technologies out there where you have to whitelist software packages. You can even implement kind of a micro barrier around every computer with a zero trust technology. But you can deal with some false positives that cause other pain points in the small business. So we are moving toward a zero trust solution in the future, but most small businesses that we come across do not have it implemented as yet, but really should be thinking that way. Always, again, back to limiting who has access to what. And the problem is it's the software manufacturers that have made everything so simple. For example, QuickBooks. When you work on QuickBooks, it can open the QuickBooks file right wherever you've located it. However, QuickBooks can see every file on the network. Why is that? It shouldn't, right? That's the zero trust. It should only be looking at opening QuickBooks files, and that should be something that programmers work to help us with as well by implementing kind of a zero trust technology rather than always having, we spend more money protecting ourselves from Microsoft than anything else. If they could come up with a way to configure zero trust by default, that would have been helpful, but that wouldn't have made everyone's adoption of Microsoft so easy and Mr. Gates a trillionaire.
That's right. Yeah, and you always hear a lot of the stories, when you talk about cybersecurity about a program, and I'm not trying to talk down to programmers where they leave an API wide open. That API can gain access to a database on the back end. The bad actors get access to the API, and they now have access to your data as well. All right, Lauren, looks like there's another question coming up. What do we have?
Oh, my word, Wes, we have so many questions rolling in. Keep them coming. But this one is from George. George says, do you have any recommended templates for best practices and procedures?
Well, yeah, so believe it or not, there are templates out there from smarter folks than us that talk about this. So the NIST 800-171 framework, you can look it up. And that is a framework you can follow as a best policy and procedure. And even here in the state of Connecticut, our legislature actually kind of put out a law that said, if your company is at least trying to follow some of these policies and procedures, and you do get impacted, there'll be some bit of mitigation to the damage caused financially as far as lawsuits and what have you. So the most common one we come across is that NIST 800-171. There's PCI compliance, there's HIPAA compliance, there's CMMC compliance. You name it, there's tons of them out there. But if you started looking at the NIST 800-171, that's the one I would recommend the most.
Certainly, Erik. And if I understand right, because I've actually had to pull some of those templates down, they're freely available, right? And they make them available to the public. So yes. as at least a framework, you can start to tweak it a little bit and massage the framework a little bit to help your company, right?
And the problem is they do it all the time too, is you spend all this time to get all these frameworks set in place and like, we're going to scrap that. We're going to change that. So it's a constantly moving target, so keep that in mind.
Sure. Revision 5 comes out next month, that's for sure. Lauren, I hear let's go ahead and take another customer.
Excellent. All right, this one is from Jason. Jason says, what kind of training would you give new employees during onboarding concerning cybersecurity?
Oh gosh, that's such a tough question because there's never enough information. But a good security awareness training program is something you should be implementing by default. A company called KnowBe4 is a pretty popular technology out there, and it helps get if you enroll your folks in the beginning in this kind of basic security awareness training, you can choose and decide which modules you're going to want to show them. And by having that security awareness training running, it keeps their eyes open and keeps their interest peaked that, oh, okay, that's a interesting email here that's talking about, like we just had this recently on our radio show. There was a Zuckerberg thing where Facebook is giving out money, right, for they got a lawsuit against them or something like that. And this person got an email saying, hey, you can qualify for the lawsuit. Well, that's exactly how phishing works. It takes something that they know in the news and tries to trick you into clicking on that link, maybe putting it in your bank account because you want that $50 or $5 they're going to send you, and all of a sudden the bad guys are emptying your bank account. So security awareness training is something you should consider, and make sure your employees are enrolled. And of course, you need to be phished. They need to be kind of tricked on a regular basis, and they will get feedback whether or not they shouldn't have clicked on the link or should have, or did report it as a phish. So SAT is pretty popular. Obviously, ITProTV, there's no reason you can't get training through you guys too as far as some of this stuff. I don't know that it's really geared toward end users so much, but I would suspect you have some training that would be valuable.
Oh, definitely. And you know what? Let's go ahead because we are here for you, the viewers. Lauren, let's go ahead. We've got some more questions. We'll keep them going.
Absolutely. All right. This one is from Greg. Greg says, you just mentioned having an EDR in place. Can you discuss some of the common EDRs in the market today?
Yeah, the more common ones are, again, it's Huntress is the one that we see the most out there. Another one is an MDR. EDR and MDR. EDR is kind of a light flavor. It's going to require you, the business, to do something by being notified. And MDR, which is next generation, next level stuff, that'd be a company like Blackpoint Cyber. They will actually take action for you. They'll look at what is happening on your system, and they will actually shut it down and prevent it from occurring. And that's really the Cadillac of technologies out there. Those two are the ones I'm most familiar with off the top of my head. Frankly, I don't keep a catalog of all the potential ones we could use. I have better things to do, unfortunately, to figure that out. But we work on our stack on a regular basis to try to make sure it's an affordable and effective one. But there's always competitors out there, and as these come and go, as far as companies doing better or worse, we'll always try to adjust that. But Huntress and Blackpoint are two good EDR, MDR companies.
Very good. And we've mentioned, and you've mentioned a couple of times now, authentication, multi-factor authentication. We definitely want to have stuff like this in place. We want to have those authorization techniques. But one thing that kind of seems to skirt the mindset of a lot of people is this concept called non-repudiation. One of the reasons we want to do that is because we want to have accountability for the things that happen within our systems. Can you speak to that a little bit? The auditing side, and not from an auditor's perspective, but things like system logs, tracking system-wide events. If we're using things like shared accounts, it's very hard to hold, a person or an entity accountable for the actions that they've done. So, that concept of being able to, associate a specific set of actions with a certain user has to be important.
It is. And it isn't. So as you talked about this in the webinar, this is small business security. Mm-hmm. So it's rare that small businesses are going to cough up the money for a SIM technology that's going to do that syslogging you're describing, that file, to make sure those files haven't been modified by XYZ users. They're not going to really pay for that technology generally unless they're required to, and that's where your NIST comes in. That's where your aerospace companies come in. If they want to attain the proper credentials in order to get the projects, they do have to do that. So that you're talking about a SIM, Wes, and again, Blackpoint has a solution for that as well that you can bolt on to the MDR technology, so you can do that. Couple negatives though, it does impact performance of the network as it's constantly monitoring and creating network traffic, doing all that work, monitoring the syslog and then sending it off site to be stored, so that can be reviewed later should you have any kind of impact on your business. So there's a bit of a weight to that technology and using that technology, and it's not found often in the small business arenas that we work in as far as a requirement, unless you're doing military.
Sure, that makes sense. So a little bit outside of the scope of a small to medium business. All right, let's go ahead and take our next question, Lauren.
All right, we have so many questions coming in. We really appreciate your engagement during this webinar. Keep them coming. This one is from Rolando. They say, should you pay the ransom or not? It seems that most security experts, no longer 110%, are against it, particularly with negotiation on price. How do you feel?
Well, that's really kind of interesting question. So I've actually dealt with clients who had been attacked and had to pay the ransom, and they went to go get the money, and the bank said, no, you can't do that because you're participating in a crime. And that's what the FBI will tell you. You should not pay the ransom, and you shouldn't have to pay the ransom if you have a good backup of your system. However, if they actually exfiltrate your data and say, well, you know what, we're going to put this on the dark web, and we pinky swear if you go ahead and pay the ransom, we won't give it out to everybody, then you may have to pay it anyways. So the FBI and those folks would tell you not to do it. If you have a good backup and a way to recover, that's a great way to prevent it. If you have two-factor authentication in place and keep the bad guys out in general, that's where you're going to avoid paying the ransom. And also the other thing is, many times you pay the ransom and the tool they give you to restore is awful and may not even work half the time. So I would do your best to prevent that if you can. And dealing with the negotiators, the FBI knows who the negotiators are that are out there that offer this service, and they're the ones that are going to submit the ransom to the bad guys. And again, your bank says, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to be working and paying and being a participant in a crime.
Sure, and we've kind of mentioned protecting the systems that that touch our data, right? We talked a little bit about some of the endpoints. You've mentioned things like EDR, and a little bit about the networks too. When we talk about computer and endpoint protection, some of the things that have been mentioned: strong passwords, multi-factor authentication. You mentioned patching your software so that we can close off those security vulnerabilities. That right. It's not a matter of if they're there; it's just when we find them. Other things that I can think of are things like disk and device encryption. Whether you're talking, yes. laptops and workstations versus mobile devices. Is there something else that comes to mind in that might be a best practice?
That was quite a list there you gave, Wes. All those are good things and important. I'm trying to think of what you could have possibly left out from that list, but you did cover a lot of it. Obviously, your firewall is something that you need to consider updating and keeping current. You can look at firewalls and the fact that their firmwares have all sorts of holes in them, and if the company is already past end of life, they're not going to be patching them or updating them on for you at all. So keep your firewalls up to date, keep that firmware up to date, and try to replace those firewalls physically at least every 6 years, if not sooner. It's up to really your budget, of course. But that's a good way to help those endpoints be protected from being behind the network.
Most definitely. All right, looks like we've got another question coming in. Lauren, what's our next question?
Yes, Wes, we have one from Nazir. They say, and you kind of were talking about firewalls, but this is mostly device related. What device do you recommend we could use or have on our network?
I'm not sure that what he means. A security device of some kind that's going to keep an eye on the network is what he's asking for. I don't know if that's what he's asking. But a general network firewall, SonicWall, Cisco Firewall, Meraki, those are good general firewalls for security. We don't typically recommend a physical device beyond that handles security. And again, most small businesses have very limited budgets, and those devices, they could exist. I'm not really sure where he's going with this question, I don't think.
Sure, and how about, when we talk about maybe devices that we do have on the network, I think of wireless networks, right? We want mobility, we don't want to be attached in one location, so wireless is long been very important inside of our network. Mm-hmm. So, things that come to mind, again, you've kind of already touched base, whether you're talking about one device or the other, right? We want to steer away from the defaults, right? We want to change the default administrative passwords, the SSID. I know some people say to disable the SSID broadcast. Right, remote administration, disabling remote administration. What are your feelings and thoughts on that?
Well, most companies like us do a lot of remote administration, and that
Sure.
really has to be locked down very well, so that when folks like us connect into your network, it's secure. So you will have remote administration as a requirement for most companies. But you're right, Wes. Locking down and making sure the defaults aren't wide open. Deny all first, and then start allowing as you go is really the key here. Yeah, that's.
It does make sense. You don't want all remote administration, or Erik can't help you with your network for sure. How about
It gets tough.
Right. How about VPN services? How crucial and critical are they in today's day and age, even for small businesses to maybe implement?
Yeah, with COVID, I mean, it got crazy where everyone had to be configured remotely, and at the same time, within 20 minutes, hey, I got to work. We're all locked up. So VPNs are the ways to go. You need VPN running with a two-factor authentication. It's really key. That way, nobody's connecting to your network without that second factor. And of course, your data is encrypted when you do that, when you work with a VPN. So it's a key way to connect to your system, and it is the primary way you should be connecting. If you're using other methods without a VPN, I would contend you're less secure.
Sure. And on-site setting up your own VPN can be a little complex for some companies. So do you recommend, not any specifics, but the fact that you can utilize a service and you can offload some of that responsibility and some of the complexities?
Right. That's the whole purpose of our existence as a service provider for our clients, is that they're not experts in IT. They're financial planners, like I said. They're manufacturers. They're accountants. They're lawyers, and they really can't afford to have a dedicated IT person on staff to do that. So they need experts like us who continue to update our skills on a regular basis, thanks to you guys, of course. And that way we know what we're doing, we know our guys know what we're doing. And a lot of times the internal IT people that are found in small businesses end up getting kind of stale. There's really just this little network they're dealing with, and they don't know what they don't know. So companies like us can help even those folks get more up to speed on understanding the threats that are out there. It's exponential. Even in the past maybe 5 or 10 years, ever since ransom or cryptocurrency became a thing, our jobs have become much more difficult.
Sure, and it can't be overstated how important it is to have, somebody else out there like your company that can provide that services, so that the company can turn and focus their ideas and bring their products to market. They can have that rapid adaptation, if I could say that right, to the changes in the market. And now it looks like we do have another question coming up. Lauren, what do we got on deck next?
Yes, this is from Steven. They say, should we keep a risk register? And where would I get an example of one?
A risk register. Well, I haven't heard that term in my current iterations of what I do every day, but you should keep some idea as part of that disaster planning we talked about of the areas of your business that are potentially at risk, whether it's your users, who should have access to what, the type of data that you have. You need to create that as part of your disaster recovery, but we don't see that term risk register used. Have you heard that before, Wes?
Oh, absolutely. So risk register is just, once you've gone through the risk assessment, you've identified all of the risks that are associated with a company and organization and their assets. Basically, it turns out it's really a lot of times just an Excel spreadsheet, right? And they do the classifications and they rate it according to the probability, the likelihood that that a threat's going to be realized, and what is the impact. And then you can do the classifications. You get a description and an identifier. And then some more attributes of what the threat might be, and then you get things like a probability or a prioritizing level. And it's basically an Excel spreadsheet. There are many out there that you can download for free that are templates, and they'll have things like that matrix built right into the Excel spreadsheet. But a lot of times that's what it is. It's hey, we've identified these risks. We've seen what assets that they might have, the threats, vulnerabilities that are there, and again, it just gives a large overview of all the risks associated with a company's assets.
We do run that with assessments. Just the term didn't pop into my mind. Yeah. We do run that with the rapid fire tools that are out there for the assessments to get that register as he described it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a phone book for all of your the risks that you've identified in your company.
And you should run it regularly.
Yes, and that's the thing. And another thing about that risk register, it's an ever-growing document. And anytime you adopt new technologies, well, you're probably going to have have to go back and you're going to have to do the whole process again. So we never kind of rest on our laurels there, and it's an ever-growing document. All right, looks like we've got, well, another question. So what's on deck now?
This one is from Stephen. They say, oh, I'm sorry, we just did Stephen. This one's from Greg. They say, for a small or home office, what small affordable hardware firewall do you recommend?
Well, for the small business, we'd look at Sonic walls. We like the TZ270 firewalls. They're affordable, and you can bolt on some good security technology on top of that. For home users, the Linksys line seems to be something that's still pretty popular. This, again, a Cisco Linksys device, $300 range for the home is what I'd recommend. Don't skimp on it. Really, if you think about it these days, your internet and your connection to your internet used to be you'd stick your firewall in your basement and never pay attention to it. Now it's more important than a coffee maker. So get it out in the middle of your home and shine lights on it to show how great it is, and that'll help you with your performance as well. But the Cisco Linksys devices in that $300 range, and the Sonic wall is going to be around the $1,300 or $1,400 range for most small to mid-sized businesses. It goes up from there, obviously, depending on the LAN WAN throughput you need. And the size of your company. You can get firewall devices from Meraki and Cisco. They're going to range in that $3,000 to $5,000 range.
Most definitely. And to kind of piggyback off of that, Greg's question there, thank you for that question there, Greg. Do you, for the businesses, do you recommend business class hardware? And what I mean by that is something like Sonic Wall versus the Linksys, which we know is more geared for the home environment. Right.
So the small business arena is interesting. It's five systems up to, let's say, even 50, right? That would be considered small business. In the old days, we would have recommended those small, $300 firewalls. Even with the Ciscos, the 340s that are out there, the 320s. Well, 320s are also end of life, but 340s, let's say, might be a $300 firewall or say. But nowadays, you need more protection. You need something that's going to be able to implement additional filtering, geofencing, just so the whole planet doesn't even see your business anymore. You can completely hide it with the technologies that are out there and the more expensive devices. And their LAN WAN throughput is much better after they've implemented the technology that's filtering you. In the old days, when Sonic walls first came out, they would actually reduce the internet performance by 60%. So the customer's like, hey, wait a minute, Eric, I pay so much money for internet now, and now it's half the speed. I'm like, well, yeah, you're protected. Well, they want you to turn it off. So nowadays, you got to spend the money on a better system, and they are better devices these days. So it's worth that $1,500 to get protected until they're not, right? So here's the issue, Wes, and you know this, right? Whatever device I talk about today could have a vulnerability tomorrow.
That's right.
It's a never-ending battle. So again, these are all just trying to apply best practices, and there's a little bit of hope and pray that you can trust these vendors to continue to update and proactively fill the leaks and holes before the bad guys find them.
Sure. We've been talking a lot about protecting our systems, and one of the things that I'd like to talk about, if we could, is protecting the future. And we can do that by leveling up, your team so that they can be aware. And I'm sure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this goes past the basic end user security training. Is that right?
It would, right? So again, companies like us, unfortunately, don't have dedicated training folks, except we do. We have a dedicated person designed to make sure our folks are constantly up to date and trained. We use your technologies, obviously, for a lot of that to keep our guys up to speed. Most of our competitors, or many of our competitors, don't do that and hope that their current people will train themselves. And the old line goes, what if we train our people and they leave? Well, the second part of that is, well, what if you don't train them and they stay? The key is you need to make sure your IT company is investing in their folks, so they are fully trained on what they're supposed to be doing. So that just because they were selling sneakers a month ago, they understand how to do the computer work now because they've been fully trained. That's half the battle in this business, and we find so many folks out there that are not trained on what they're doing. And you can see it in the configurations when you pick up the client and you're like, oh my gosh, that server was installed upside down and backwards. And they didn't even know it.
Sure, and and I'd like to, maybe ask what you do at Tab Computer Systems, because there's a difference between training and professional development, right? Training usually fits just that small business need. It might be a large business need, but a specific business need. How important is it for the more long-term goals of the company to implement something like professional development that might go a little bit farther than the immediate need? Is that something that you all strive to do, and maybe something that other companies should be doing as well?
It really is, and the more folks out there that get their people trained, the better for all of us, right? But here at Tab, we really focus on certifications for our techs within security certifications, server certifications, firewall certifications. We want them to kind of show their papers that say, hey, we know what we're doing, and that's the good professional development for them as far as they can improve their careers with that as well. And then of course there's just the regular training on every product that we sell. You need to make sure that the guys that are implementing the technology fully understand the technology. You just can't hit install and walk away. There's a lot involved in this type of stuff. So you need to invest in your people's understanding of this technology. Again, I've been doing this for 32 years at Tab. In the old days, hey, you have some IT experience? Yeah, I got a computer in my basement. Oh, okay, you're hired. Now you really need to get trained up. There's too much going on out there that if you can't just put some green person out and throw them into a law firm and say, install this computer. If they don't fully understand EDR, 2FA, web defense, email filtration, backup, and the general principles like you'd find in a Security Plus certification, for example.
Sure, it's a lot more than just clicking next in a wizard and waiting on a progress bar or, a reboot, like we say, which is usually 30% of our career. All right, now, I know that you have another question here.
We do.
All right.
Yeah, this one is from Henry. They say, how does a small business handle EDR or NDR on telework remote employees using their personal devices?
Well, you're going to have to spend the money on having them buy a business computer. They're not going to let you load stuff on their devices. They're not going to let you install web filtration where they can't go anywhere but where you tell them to. So unfortunately, companies are going to have to invest in company laptops or company systems that you can then secure properly for you're doing it for your customers. If you're a financial planner, I really wouldn't like your associate using his personal computer where he surfs who knows where after he's done for the day, working on my finances, right? So you really need to start with buying them a computer. That's where you got to start. And then you can control it. Then you can encrypt it. You can configure the EDR or MDR technology, the endpoint protection, the 2FA, the web filtration, and now you know that your customers are more safe when your people use that computer than if they're using their home system.
Sure.
And that's really the basic.
Most definitely. Now I got to put the security hat back on, and that goes with good training, right? End user awareness, that outer wrapper that we talk about, defense in depth, and making sure people know why and what their role is. Erik, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your day. I know you all are busy over there. We really appreciate having you here. This has been really fun, and I know we could probably go for a couple more hours, and I would enjoy that, and I'm sure some of our viewers would as well out there. So, and to all of our viewers, thank you for joining us. But Lauren, I think it's time to announce the winner of some swag. Is that so?
Yes, I am so excited. This is my favorite part of the webinar. Of course, the security was fantastic as well.
Oh, okay.
But now is the time that we celebrate you participating in our webinar. So if you put a question in the chat, you are eligible to win some swag. And our winner for today is...
Drum roll!
Brian T. Congratulations
to
Brian T. Thank you so much for writing in and joining our webinar today. Wes, this is fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you to Erik, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. You will receive a link to the recording of the webinar delivered to your inbox. Remember, the coupon code is webinar30. See you back here for the next ITProTV webinar.